Welcome to the Savvy Luminary podcast, Astrology for Entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Leslie Tagorda, creator of the Astrobrand Method, business astrologer, brand designer, author, and Aquarius boss woman. I help visionary spiritual entrepreneurs and impact makers like you illuminate and amplify your unique star powers so you can be the luminary you were born to be. You've heard me mention him by name. You've probably seen him on camera. And if you've worked with me, you've definitely received an email from him. Today, we are celebrating Jeff Campanero, my right-hand man for the last 12 years. Holy smokes. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Leslie. Hi, everyone.
So I wanted to invite Jeff on to the Savvy Luminary podcast because, well, we have a lot of things going on in June. First of all, Jeff, my right-hand man, is a Gemini, so we're celebrating his birthday. And also it is Pride Month, so we are celebrating Jeff's identity and intersectionality. But I also wanted just to share like some behind the scene things that, Jeff is always executing and juggling for me and just running around, working his brilliance with his Gemini superpowers. So, hey, Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about you that, we might not actually know about you?
Yeah, of course. So when I'm not working with Leslie, a lot of people don't really know this about me. I'm a YouTuber and gamer that primarily focuses on women wrestling and women wrestling storylines, just because I feel like we'll talk more about it later, but that topic just doesn't get talked about enough, or it doesn't get recognized for what it actually is. So I felt like I want to provide a platform for that kind of storylines for people to see and see like, women wrestling is freaking awesome. Like sometimes it's better than the men. And I just want to put that out there for everyone to just realize and see like the potential of what women wrestling can do.
Oh my gosh. I just love that so much because so with all of your Gemini superpowers and how you're using all of this variety, but we met when you were still in like art school, in design school. And I had reached out to a friend of mine who was going to school and I was like, I'm looking for an intern. And you reminded me that was like what, 2010 was that?
2010, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's crazy, yeah. I remember walking into the class and he was like, oh, I have a friend who's from Hawaii who's looking for a design intern. I don't know if you're interested, but if I can get your number, I can connect you both. And from there is history, I guess. Here we are 12 years later.
12 years later, from like intern to like my indispensable right-hand man.
Yes.
And it's been such a journey because what did you study when you went to art school?
When I was at the Academy of Art, I studied web design and new media. So I touched base on like graphic design, web design, user experience. I wanted to dabble in all the different things. And I guess that's the Gemini part of me. I want to keep learning different things, not just one specific lane. So that's led me to what I am today.
Yeah, it's so amazing. I mean, you see, like 10 years ago, gosh, our business was so different than where it is today. Like we were doing mostly web design, mostly for like like micro businesses and nonprofits. Yeah. And then I think it was right after I went on maternity leave and I like kind of handed the reins over to you. And then that's when things like just really started to expand.
Yeah, it was when you went on maternity leave, it was definitely like kind of like a shock to me. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of like doing this on my own. Like you were there to like keep me in check, and then it was just such a different role for me, but like it actually helped me grow as a person and a designer, just like how to like manage the business. And I've like just grown from that so much.
This is an experience because, it's so funny because like I know people's charts, but like my closest people, like Jeff and my husband, like I don't like to experience their charts. I don't like to know them. But so Jeff, sorry, you are officially a grown-up now, according to astrology.
Yes. Oh, yes, totally. I think we talked about it before, and like I definitely felt it, like all the things that I've kind of like experienced in my Saturn return, like you're like, oh, that's totally what's supposed to happen. Like where I was experiencing, okay, well, I need to kind of cut things out of my life because it just wasn't for me anymore. And you're like, that's how it should be. Like, that's how, you know, you're like transitioning into this, the adult phase of your life.
I want to, if you wouldn't mind sharing, I would love to start talking a little bit about the intersectionality of your identity, because to me, this is always like really fascinating because we met in San Francisco, but
Mm-hmm.
both of us are from Hawaii. Both of us are Ilocano. Both of us like basically grew up on like the same side of the island. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of how you identify?
I identify as a gay man, and if it wasn't until maybe 2, 3 years ago where I fully accepted it, and the reason for that is because if you heard from the last podcast, our Instagram, I was outed to my family, and it was because of that I really was able to accept who I am because my family accepted me, and now like I'm just living my true self, my true life. I have no hidden secrets from my family or my friends. I'm not. I don't want to say I was never ashamed of who I was. I was just more afraid of like disappointing my family because my parents, or I thought they were the traditional Filipinos, were like, oh, you know, marry a girl, go be a nurse, be a doctor. But I should have known when they were so accepting of me becoming an artist. Like they were always going to be accepting of me no matter who I love.
Love that. But I mean, just like so terrible that some like you didn't have the opportunity to actually tell them, but yet they were still accepting.
Yeah, they were one thing is they said that they were just waiting for me, that they didn't want to ask me, they didn't want to like burden me and like kept asking me, oh, where's your girlfriend? They were just waiting for me to be comfortable with telling them like who I was. And and I think it was just the stigma of like the traditional Filipino families, because like
Yeah.
tradition is like, oh, you know, you have to have a wife, you need to get married in the church, become in the medical field. But I broke all of those boundaries, and I didn't fall into that. I'm not saying it's bad to fall into that little lane, but for me it just wasn't for me, and I was upset at myself that I never had a chance to explore that growing up, because my life could have been completely different. But at the same time, I don't regret it, because it's really shaped me to who I am today.
Yeah, and so both of us, we grew up in Hawaii, and but so you're Ilocano Filipino, and I'm half Ilocano. Can you tell the listeners what is Ilocano, and like how does that fit into being Filipino? Did you ever have that like growing up, like growing up in Waipahu? Because I grew up in like a very predominantly Filipino place in Oahu. Like there was like everybody was always identifying like I'm Visayan, I'm Tagalog, I'm I'm
Um,
Ilocano. Like that was like a big thing for me growing up.
Growing up, I never really. I think it's because I've always been surrounded by Ilocanos. Like I think it wasn't until I came here when I realized that okay, there's more Tagalogs up here than there was in Hawaii. So I never really had to like, oh I'm Ilocano, or you're Visayan, or Tagalog. It never really affected me in any way.
Mhm.
So yeah, I never really had to experience like something like what you did. It's like, oh, kind of figure out what kind of Filipino you are. To me, like it was just Filipino, like you're Filipino. It was just always like you're Filipino, I'm Filipino. Like that's something where we both are.
That's so interesting. I wonder how, well, you're considerably younger than me. You're about like 19 years younger than me, 18 years younger than me. And I remember growing up and like there was just in my town, like lots of Filipinos. And in Hawaii, for the listeners who might not know, like Hawaii was a
Mm-hmm.
plantation society where all the colonists, where the British and the Americans brought in Filipinos and Chinese and Japanese and Koreans and Puerto Ricans and Portuguese people, and literally depending on the shade of your skin, determined the class hierarchy that you had in the plantations. And they used this to separate people because they knew that there was more brown people than there were white people. And so the
Mm-hmm.
Filipinos were at like the lowest grade pay scale in the plantations, and
Yeah.
like that's just fact. And then so most of the Filipinos that came to Hawaii to work on the plantations were from the Ilocos Norte area, so the very northern tip of the Philippines. But then we started getting more people like Tagalogs and Visayans, and like there's like thousands of tribes and like thousands of languages in the Philippines. And so when I was growing up, like there was always even because of the division that the plantation workers created, even within like the Filipino division, people were always trying to divide by class. And so when I was growing up, like we could, like our neighbors that were Visayan, they wouldn't necessarily talk to us. And there was always just people talking really badly about other different cultures. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is just that I think it's so fascinating how when there's so little resources, how people kind of go head to head with like trying to prove themselves. So I'm not exactly sure where I'm going with that, but I was just wondering how that what that meant for you, if it did at all.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, it's crazy how like you experience that. I've never had to really like I never experienced like like the Visayans or the Tagalogs not wanting to talk to each other or talking to the Ilocanos because of their higher class. Maybe it's just I don't want to say a different time. Like me growing up, it was just more accepting. Like everyone just kind of categorized. Okay, you're Filipino, you're Japanese, you're Chinese. It was never like
Yeah.
the division in between each of the different nationalities or cultures.
Yeah, so to me, it's just like so fascinating how we ended up finding each other in San Francisco over design, when we both
Yes.
have like these similar roots from this like very immigrant roots in kind of central and southern Oahu, where there's a lot of Filipinos. So that's
Yeah.
interesting to me. All of the different intersections of all of that we do. So I wanted to I'm sure the listeners have a lot of questions because they get emails from you, they get reminders from you anytime something goes wrong, you're there to like fix things. Can you share what like all the things that you do working with me and in this business?
Yeah. So I do a lot of tech support for a lot of our clients, and then I also help build the websites out after we design and develop with the clients with the wireframings. What I do the most too is really the support that the clients get because Leslie is like she gets very busy and like I would love to take things off of her plate so that she can focus on what she does best. And so being there for the clients and like supporting them and answering all their questions that I to the best that I could. Is really what I enjoy doing. I just love helping people, and I just assist Leslie, just trying to make Leslie's business go smooth, run smooth. Help Leslie out as much as I can in whatever she needs.
Oh my gosh. Yes, because we have this whole astrology part. Like we produce this podcast, we present a lot of content on Instagram and social media. We have design clients where we're building out their brand and their websites. And then we also have like kind of the teaching aspect where we're, holding workshops and like webinars and like courses and things. So there's a lot of moving parts. And Jeff just like effortlessly like takes care of things. And I mean, this was like, built up like, learning all of the things. I guess that multimedia degree really
Yeah,
came in handy for you.
yeah, totally. And I think that's why it was so difficult for me to kind of answer like what do I do because it's not work for me. Like it's work, but like it doesn't feel like work to me. It just feels like something I'm naturally good at. So that's why like when you ask me like what else do you do for work, like I was like I don't really consider it work. It's just something I love doing. I love helping people. I love creating. I love designing. I love video production and all of that. So when I get things to do like that, it's just like okay, let me just produce it. Let me just work on it and then go from there.
Yeah, we haven't had a webinar in a long time, but I remember like you're like, oh my gosh, I love these webinars because you love doing like all the back end things, like when people are asking
Hmm.
questions and just like being like just producing things on the fly. That's like really fun.
Yeah.
I mean,
That was a really fun time. The webinars was a really fun time. But even now, like the when we do our new moon rituals, like when people ask questions, I love answering questions while you're speaking because you obviously can't do that at the same time. So just being there to help support you. So I'm a jack of all trades, I guess.
yes, oh my gosh. See, like when we like, no judging Gemini. Like this is like the perfect job for your Gemini sun. You also have Mercury in Gemini, like so much energy there. So can you tell us a little bit about, we talked a little bit about some of your favorite things, but like what are like the most challenging things working with me and in this business?
I think one of the most challenging things, and we've talked about it before, is like when people don't trust our expertise. I think
Hmm.
that's what makes it really difficult to get things done, because we kind of just this endless loop of a circle, and then we always end up at the beginning,
Yeah.
where all could have just like stopped at the beginning if our clients, or not just clients, just people in general, just trust the people you hire, because we would never stir you wrong or stir you in a direction that would harm your business or make you look bad. Like that is not our
Right.
goal. Our goal is
Right.
to make you look good, to make you stand out, make you a standout brand. And so having that trust in the person you hire, not in just design, but like just in general, is just going to make things a lot more easier and a lot less stressful.
Yeah, it's so surprising. Like we've done a really good job. Like there was a stretch maybe about 5 years ago where we had some like pretty like relentless clients, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like what are we doing? What am I doing to attract these clients that were just like draining our souls? Um, but now like we've really have like these clear responsibilities of like what we expect from the clients that we collaborate, and also like how to treat people. Because like there's definitely been clients who sometimes they do not treat you well, and I'm like, hold on, like what is going
Yeah.
on?
And I think that comes from like 5 years ago, we were just taking on clients just to take on clients. But now like we've really like ironed out the type of people we want to work with, the type of people we want to attract. And it was because of that rebrand of the business, has that we've maybe like 99% of our clients are like the clients we want to work with, who don't
Okay.
give me hard, like don't give us a hard time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's just because we knew what we wanted to do, and we set those expectations at the beginning.
Yeah.
And if they're not a right fit, we're like, okay, like you're not a right fit for us. So we value, we know our value now.
Yeah. We've had some like just like dream clients lately. And I think it's like reflected back like in our own intersectionality as like people of color, of people who are not traditional, like as somebody who's identifies as gay, like our last like nonprofit, the Queer Cat. They were
Hmm.
so fun. They're a theater, experiential theater company, a gay oriented theater company in San Francisco. Of course, we talked about Giselle Allen and
Yes.
oh my gosh, and Elise Preston. Um, Both just like powerful, authentic, trusting Black coaches that they're just amazing. Who else have been like someone just, and of course, all of our Astro Brand clients that have been coming through lately have
Yeah.
just been so wonderful.
Has everyone, yeah, I've like all the clients we've had recently was just, they're so great to work with. Just the communication, they know what they want, and that just makes things a lot more easier for us. Because we're not just, when we go in that endless loop, it can get so draining. Our energy gets so drained, and we just get stuck and just don't know where else to go.
Yeah.
And then when we kind of just take a step back and we see like, oh wait, it's been right there in front of us the whole time. It was like at step one. And like we
Yeah.
couldn't get to that point because it just was so draining, and just we didn't know what to do. We're just so
Yeah.
confused.
Well, and every once in a while, we'll have some customers that don't have exactly a clear vision, and then we
Yeah.
can step in and handhold to a certain point. Like I love the project that we're working on right now with Grace Van Cleve,
Yes.
and
Hmm.
she has a clear vision of what she wants, and sometimes it just takes a little bit of handholding to kind of get through all of the shoulds that come into mind. But I'm so excited to finish up her brand. We're so close on all that.
Yes.
We've had so many like amazing design projects that we haven't even posted online, which is quite, we'll get there. We need to get you an
We
assistant,
will.
Jeff.
Yes.
So, because you are so multifaceted and we've been working together for so long, I'm so curious, like, why, like, this kind of this sense of like you're like pretty much my family, like you're part of this business. Like, what has inspired you to stick around for so long?
I think it's because you trust me. I think it's, again, it goes back to trust. Like you trust me with a lot of things in the business that I think, I mean, maybe it's because like it's been us too for the past like 10 or so years.
Yeah.
And it's just that trust in each other, knowing that like we're not going to steer each other wrong. I think that's what made me really stay. And like you've given me the freedom to just work on myself as well as work on things with you. Like you always gave me the permission to like if you need a break, take a break. Like, you deserve it. I think just having all that validation from you has just really made me want to stay with you and Human Creative.
Mm. I've seen you just grow so much in terms of like, taking everything that you've learned from that I'm teaching and all the experiences that, from video production and podcast production, and now how you're using that in your YouTube creation mode. Can you talk about like how some of the skills that you've learned with me have now like gone and crossed over into your side business?
Yeah, totally. I've always wanted to create a YouTube channel for a long time, but I was always comparing myself to the other YouTube creators on there. And then it wasn't until Leslie started talking about like stop comparing yourself. Like you have a voice, you have a message, that really kicked me in the butt. I was like, you know what, just do it. Like, people are gonna love you, people are gonna hate you, but as long as you love what you do, like, that's all that matters. And it was because of that, like, finding my voice and everything really really stepped up my game with my YouTube channel, and has created my following that I have now.
Yeah, you have a big following on YouTube, and you're actually like monetizable now, right? Like that's like
Yes,
the
yeah.
ultimate goal.
Yeah, totally. Definitely monetizable. And it wasn't about just making money off of YouTube in the beginning. It was just more about just like creating a platform where I could highlight the women wrestling storylines that we weren't seeing on TV at the time. And so just creating those storylines and those ideas to give the women wrestling fans something to kind of grasp onto was really my drive for creating the content, and the monetization came later, and I didn't even realize I was getting monetized till they sent me my first check. So that's where, like, I know, like, it wasn't about the money. It was just getting a story out there, getting my ideas out there into the world.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. So can you tell us a little bit about, because I'm assuming that not very many listeners know much about women's wrestling. Can you tell us about the TV show first, and then tell us about the actual women's wrestling?
Yeah, so there's a company, World Wrestling Entertainment. I think most people will know them as, like, back in the day it was WWF, World Wrestling Federation. They do weekly shows and then monthly pay-per-views that kind of have storylines around. They do family storylines, they do love storylines, or just like underdogs trying to become to the top of the food chain. And with That's just the general of wrestling, but with women wrestling especially, they were always known as, let's see, P breaks, because they were never looked upon as, oh, they can pull out amazing matches, they can do amazing storylines, which they could. They were just never given the chance to, because when you, like, not even in just wrestling, but women in general just get looked at as the pretty person. They're the fluffer of, like, TV shows. They don't make any big roles. And so maybe 2-3 years ago when I started my YouTube channel, that's when women wrestling started to get really, really popular. They were finally getting the limelight that they wanted, like that they deserved. And I was so happy for that, for the us women wrestling fans. We're no longer getting bra and panty matches. We were actually getting month-long storylines about how the underdog is finally going to get the big title match and win over the bad person.
There's a show on Netflix. It's called Glow, right?
Glow. Yep.
But anyway, there's this great show on Netflix. If you haven't already seen it, it's called Glow. And it talks about like kind of the women's wrestling kind of in the 80s, I think it was, or the 70s or the 80s.
In the
And
80s, yeah.
I think what people don't understand about wrestling, it's like it's part athleticism, it's part drama, it's part creativity in like fashion and attire, and it's like a spectacle and it's a show. So it's a combination of all of these different kinds of intersections that for men's wrestling, like we know that the champions and stuff, those are pre-recorded, they're part of a storyline. But the women's wrestling world, they were taking everything to this like next level in terms of athleticism and creativity and drama and storyline, and they were not getting the same airtime as the men's wrestling. And so that's what, for you, Jeff, that's really what was coming to fore. It's like, well, we have to kind of amplify their voices. And so how do you actually amplify and create your storylines? How do you amplify the voices of the not real life, but like the in real life, the people who are actually doing the wrestling versus what you're doing on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, totally. So I when I see storylines on TV, a lot of times it's definitely rushed. Like they'll get maybe like 2 weeks for a storyline. When for the men they get like month versions. Storylines that I want to see, like I want to see specific wrestlers who don't even show up on TV, have them be spotlighted on a match or on a show where there's a big story of like, okay, they're the underdog. They need to win the match, but like, how are they going to do that? Like, do they get beat up for months and months, and then at the very end, they'll get that big surprise win? Like, that's something I want to do. Like, I want people to feel good and follow these wrestlers and like root for them because they deserve it. They work so hard in and out of the ring. They think so much about like how they want to present themselves in their matches and their entrances. And so when I do these monthly pay-per-views, I also think about, okay, what kind of gear do they need to wear? Like they need to stand out because it's such a big moment for them. I add fireworks or pyro. That's what they call it in their entrances. So it stands out even more. And then even their move sets, I change it for the big pay-per-views because, it's a pay-per-view. It's like the Super Bowl. It has to stand out. It has to be memorable. So I create even custom move sets for them to use only in the pay-per-view in the match so that it's like, oh my God, this is such a great ending to the storyline.
Yeah, like it's because I think what to kind of clarify, what ends up happening is like what people can watch on television in terms of like the organization, they're picking and choosing like who is going to get the airtime, and
Hmm.
they're often picking and choosing like the biggest names and not necessarily people of color or the underdogs. And so Jeff is like, let's quash this. Let's make my own storyline that gets to extend it and really feature. Let's like really show those grand entrances that the wrestlers
Hmm.
work so hard on that oftentimes the TV will cut out and people never get to see it. And so Jeff is actually using, you're using a game, right? To create
Yes, I'm using
the,
an in-game.
yeah. So
Yeah, I'm using an in-game platform to create these like entrances. I'm really focusing on those entrances because those entrances really set the tone for the match. And when I see the actual real life shows and I see it on YouTube or TV, it gets cut out. Like they'll just get, oh, in the ring is so and so. I'm just like, no, their entrances are like bomb. Like, why aren't you showing it? Like, it hypes up the match and it gives people like a person to root for.
yeah, it creates that kind of attachment to the
Yeah.
character. And so you can think of like women's wrestling as like athleticism, soap opera, and a drag show all in one.
Yeah, totally. And that's why I feel like women wrestling is so much more complex than men's wrestling because men's wrestling, when they go out, they'll just put on their gear and wrestle. Women, there's so much more to it. Like they have to worry about their hair, their makeup, like their gears are they're always changing something about themselves because they want to stick out and do better than the last time. And that's why I love women wrestling so much because they do so much more than, okay, go out there and go put on a match.
And because since you've been doing this YouTube channel, you've actually have relationships with some of these women wrestlers and help promote them, right?
Yeah, I've been in contact with a few women wrestlers who are happy that I create storylines that they don't normally see. I think the beginning stages of my YouTube, there wasn't a women tag division or women's tag team title, and I created a title for them and created this big match. And actually four of them who were in the match actually shared my story online and was hoping that, okay, I hope this comes true. And a year later, it came true.
Oh my
There was
gosh.
a tag division, there was a tag team title for them to fight for. And so it was just crazy to see like a year later after I posted that video, it actually came into fruition. And I'm not saying I'm the one that put it there, but I put it into the universe and it just so happens they were able to create one after that.
I mean, you definitely had an influence. I mean, so for those of us, like, there's probably not a lot of us in the Savvy Luminary listeners who would necessarily watch women's wrestling. But what do you like? What would you love them to know about like why they should just kind of check it out and what should they watch?
I think if they're gonna watch something, they can. I'll put a link in the show notes. But there is a all women's pay per view that WWE produced once, which they say they'll never do again. But that's a whole nother topic. But what I want you guys to take note about women wrestling is it's so much more than what you like. It's so much more than just like two people fighting in a ring. There's a storyline that needs to be that gets told with the way that they fight, the way that they interact with each other, the way that they react to the move sets. There's just a story that needs to be heard in the show notes of a full pay-per-view of just all women wrestling matches. And each of those matches, there is a preview video that promotes the matches. So you can kind of get a feel of like the storylines, because that was the first time they've ever done something focusing on the women. But that was the last time they have ever done it. First and last time, unfortunately.
Well, and then you also have to share one of your popular YouTube videos too, because I mean, how many followers do you have? And like people like just love your stuff.
Yeah, I have a little under 5,000 followers, subscribers on YouTube with over, I think I've been on YouTube for 2 or 3 years now. So I've been growing pretty quickly, which is surprising to me. That
Yeah.
people come and see from all over the world. I have people from Brazil who come to my live premieres, people in the Philippines. So, and the time zones are like way different, and they're there watching it for like 3 hours with me, chatting with me, each and every month.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh. So I just, if, even if women's wrestling doesn't interest you, or if it does and you're super excited, like check it out. And I love sharing Jeff's story because he's bringing, this is like very niche and it's very empowering. Like he's really sharing the voice of the underdog and creating the storylines that he wants to see. And like, that's really inspirational. So I just love that. Thank you, Jeff. So tell us, tell us what kind of content you're creating now because of all of these shows. But like people have been asking you for advice, right?
Yeah, totally. So a lot of people wonder how I create my storylines and how do I manage my superstars, my storylines, my titles. And so that really brought me to like creating some kind of like a free version of like how I plan out my season, which kind of takes like each month we'll have 4 weeks of storylines. And then if we want to progress it. So I'm working on creating a nice little PDF like of how to do that so you can keep track of your storylines, because I used to do it where I just write things down, but then it doesn't connect to the longer versions of the story. So I want to make sure it's easy for us to kind of always go back 2 months prior, so that when you create that season finale, you can create this brand new video package of how you got to that one point. And so that really helped me this year. I kind of tested out my own process with this season too, and it worked out so well. The storylines were just so much more cohesive than it was in my season one. So that's what I'm currently working on, so I can give people a little taste of like how it is for behind the scenes of creating these content for YouTube.
And then you'll also be creating your paid course, right? For people who are even more in depth and wanting to do their own storylines.
Yeah, totally. That I'm still working on the details about like how I want to push that, but definitely something that I want to teach people to do, like even with video editing, like how I record my content, how to get licensing for music so that you can also monetize on YouTube. Because like if you're using other people's music, it's hard to get monetized. So just reaching out to musicians, like even just people who are growing up in the music industry, like that would be a great way for them to get their music out there with YouTube creators.
Oh my gosh, you're so talented, Jeff.
Thank you.
I just love that. We'll have the show notes, but where on YouTube can people find you?
Yeah, so my YouTube channel is JX Camps Gaming, JAYXCAMPS Gaming. I'll put that in the show notes, and then that's also my Instagram handle as well.
Awesome. Oh my goodness. So let's talk a little bit about astrology before we wrap up, because, again, I'm looking at your chart. It's like always so like fresh and new to me. But I'm curious, since working with me and like kind of understanding how to read a chart and learning about astrology, what have you kind of learned about yourself since we've taken this turn into astrology over the last few years?
I've learned that everything that I've questioned about like myself and like what I do is what I'm meant to do. Like I think when you first read my chart, it was really validating because I never really knew what I wanted to do or if this was the right path for me. But the way I do specific things, like I'm always asking questions, I'm always like asking for validation. It was always in my chart, and that's just who I am as a person because I don't like to disappoint people.
Yeah.
Um, and I know a little personal story. Like recently, when we had a little thing, like I called Leslie crying or upset because like I didn't want to disappoint her. And like that's
Yeah.
just me personally. And she was like, "Oh no, you didn't disappoint me. Like it wasn't you. It's just that's just it was just like an off day for everyone." And so she really helped me validate like, "Oh, it's not me. Like if I'm having an off day, it's an off day."
Yeah. And that's like we have good days, we have bad days, and it's okay to, like we get so afraid of like we're not exactly perfect, right?
Yeah,
It's like it really destroys us
yeah,
for both
it
me and
does.
you.
And you've really taught me like, we're not perfect. Like we all make mistakes. We just have to own up to it. And I did. And I just learned to just like be open with like who I am. Like if I have something to say, I should just say it. And that's really important. Like if I'm not feeling up for something, like be open about it because, you're not going to be able to fix it unless you say something.
Is it okay if I look at your chart a little bit, if I read your chart a little
Yeah.
bit?
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Every time we come back, there's always like another like layer to pull off. And so, Jeff is a Gemini sun, Virgo moon. So his like two inner engine luminaries are both ruled by Mercury, which his sun is conjunct Mercury. So, like Jeff is like fast. Like
Yeah.
sometimes like, slow down, Jeff, slow down.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. I'm a little too fast sometimes. Leslie always reminds me to take a breath, slow down, you'll get it. And I just like, I'm always on the go with everything, not even just work with, like, even like when I go shopping, I get things online and I call like, oh, can you hold it at the front for me? And then I'll go and get out. And that's it. That's just my life.
Yes, all of that mercurial, just so fast. So Gemini
Hmm.
sun, Virgo moon, and then Taurus rising. And so the way that you present yourself is like very steady, very dependable. And even though like we've been working together for 12 years, your ruler of Venus from Taurus, and of course that's why you also are so able to create like all these like beautifully aesthetic designs that your Taurus, the ruler of Taurus, Venus, is in your fourth house, conjunct Jupiter and conjunct Mars. And so Venus, Jupiter, and Mars conjunct, all tight conjunction in the fourth house, and you are so family oriented. It's like
Yeah.
almost like all of your best creativity goes directly to your sister, to your parents, and probably like because we've been working for so long, there's this like you probably look at me a little bit like an aunt at this point.
Yeah. Yes, totally. Yeah. I feel like we're family
Yeah,
already. And like my parents ask about you, seeing how you're doing. So, you're family.
totally. I'm always concerned about you. I'm like, like when we're like
Yeah.
even like when I'm planning my annual budgets and stuff like that, I'm like, okay, taking care of Jeff. Oh, Jeff's birthday is coming up. Oh, Jeff. So this is like so wonderful. So like with your Venus and Jupiter and Mars conjunct all like within like both Venus and Jupiter and Leo at 12 degrees and then Mars at 13 degrees, it's just like your creativity and your ability to attract and to motivate, everything is just like so expanded. And it's like, that's what you need to feel like secure. Like that's at your like foundations.
Hmm. Totally. Totally.
So that's so beautiful. That's so aligned. So, thank you, Jeff, for joining me today because I really wanted to celebrate you during Gemini season. Jeff's solar return is on June 18th. And, now he just passed his Saturn return. So there's so much going on. And I
Yeah.
appreciate and love you so much. And of course, everybody, all the listeners know that there's no way I could have built what I've built without you here with me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad you've given me the opportunity 12 years ago. You could have chose anyone, but you chose me, and the rest was history.
It was meant to be. Like this is just
It
this
was
like
totally.
yeah, one of these special things that it's really hard to recreate. So we're both
Yeah,
really lucky.
totally. I agree. Yes, I am we are so lucky to have each other. So I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. So what will we build in the next year, in the next 5 years? And wow, if we're only so lucky in the next 12 years.
Right? We'll see. Yes.
We'll
I
see.
see big things for us. I see big things for us.
I do
Yeah.
too. Thank you, Jeff. And it's for everybody, make sure to go onto YouTube at JAYX. No, wait, you tell.
Camps Gaming. Yeah.
Can you repeat it?
Yeah, my YouTube is JAYX Camps Gaming, and you can also find that on my Instagram as well.
Awesome. So everybody check out his work, just see what this women's wrestling is about. Maybe you too will find a new passion. The greatest thing that you could do to me to pass things forward is to head over to Apple iTunes and leave a rating and review for this podcast. Let others know what you think, and each rating and review helps this podcast be more visible to listeners like you.